Game of Thrones, Season 7, Episode 3, The Queen's Justice. This was honestly my favorite episode of the season so far. I know people were complaining it was kind of slow until the end, but I completely disagree. The sheer amount of content they were able to pack into 1 hour-long episode was absolutely astounding. This was really quickly paced, but it didn't neglect anything important. It managed to find the perfect balance between speedy pacing and strong storytelling, never neglecting quality at any point. I mean, there were a couple of blunders here and there, which we will get to, but all of the good stuff really overshadowed any negatives in this episode. So without further ado, let's just jump right in here. Jon arrives at Dragonstone and meets Daenerys. This is an event we've been waiting for since page 1 of the first book. You may be asking, Daenerys and Jon weren't on page 1, what are you talking about? The entire book series is called A Song of Ice and Fire. Many interpretations see this as the story of Daenerys and Jon. Jon being ice, Daenerys being fire, respectively. This isn't necessarily the perspective I take on the title scheme of the book series, but it's an interesting notion nonetheless, and this must have been an immensely satisfying episode for everyone who believes that that's the proper interpretation. I mean, it was immensely satisfying for me, and that's not even my theory. What I did not expect about this meeting, however, is that Jon refused to bend the knee to Daenerys. This decision is somewhat perplexing, especially with the historical context behind the Stark-Targaryen relationship. So if you didn't know, the northern section of Westeros, the entire area that we refer to in the show as the North, was initially a separate country ruled by the Starks. It was when Aegon Targaryen came overseas from the ruined Valyria and began his conquest that he was finally able to unite the North and South to form what we know today as the Seven Kingdoms. So essentially, what you need to get from this is that the North did not bend the knee to any Westerosi leader until Aegon's conquest. This was done out of force. It wasn't a leisurely decision. However, it still represents a sense of loyalty that the Starks had towards the Targaryens. So it's interesting that Jon sort of starkly refuses to return to this sense of loyalty. What we really see here is Jon playing hard to get. He wants to get what he wants, and that is to protect the Seven Kingdoms, to protect the Westerosi continent from the White Walkers. Now, Daenerys can't really afford to make Jon mad. She has lost the vast majority of her counts, as we see by the end of this episode. So she needs all the allies she can get, and Jon is a very strong ally. So when she refuses to help Jon unless he bends the knee, Tyrion knew he had to swoop right in there. You see, he trusts Jon. He formed a relationship with him when they were both at the Wall together back in Season 1. So he understands Jon's plight and genuinely believes him. However, that doesn't really matter in terms of convincing Daenerys. He knows that Jon's telling the truth, and he understands why he's rejecting her. He doesn't see the Game of Thrones as a worthwhile endeavor. He's seen the White Walker armies, and he knows that whoever's sitting on the Iron Throne when they invade is completely irrelevant. I sort of disagree with Jon here. If there's a ruler sitting on the Iron Throne, like Cersei, for example, who is absolutely mad, crazy, and refuses to help anyone but herself, she's not going to do anything until the White Walkers are directly at her doorstep, and by that point, it's too late. If you have someone like Daenerys on the throne, whose main goal is to help others and save the Westerosi people, she's a queen that's way more likely to help fight the White Walkers. She's someone that's way more likely to invest men, effort, and time into defeating a foreign invasion that will jeopardize the safety of her people. Tyrion essentially sees both perspectives, takes the valuable elements from both, and tries to form a compromise. He goes to Daenerys and convinces her to give something to Jon to make him more trusting of her. Give something to show her well intentions. And she does. She allows him to mine Dragonstone for the Dragonglass, used to defeat the White Walkers. She doesn't even force him to bend the knee to do so. She says, you can use this for now, and think it over, essentially. She's really just buttering up Jon so he's more tempted to bend the knee in the future and become a strong ally. Something that she desperately needs, as I said before. However, this whole Jon, Tyrion, and Daenerys dynamic wasn't the only important thing to happen on Dragonstone during this episode. When Jon's arriving, Melisandre is nowhere to be found, so Varys goes looking for her. He finds her on a cliff overlooking the whole scene, and he pretty much asks her, like, she was the one that convinced Daenerys to bring Jon here. Why isn't she coming down to say hi to Jon? And she pretty much explains that they left on bad terms, and that she's going to be leaving Westeros. She is going to come back because she has to die here. So she must have seen it in a vision that she's going to die in the War for the Dawn. She's going to die helping Azor Ahai, who pretty much is guaranteed to be Jon Snow, defeat the White Walkers and the forces of the Great Other. Come to think of it, the Great Other hasn't even been mentioned in the show. I should probably do an explanation on the whole Great Other-R'hllor conflict at some point. But what the real meat is here is that Melisandre finishes this statement by saying she's going to die in Westeros, and so are you, to Varys. If you remember, Varys is actually somewhat connected to the Red God in the overall narrative. You see, he's a very Game of Thrones-y character, but he also has some ice and fire elements trickled in. And those are always the best character, the ones that mix the two ongoing narratives together. When he was a kid, it was a Red God worshipper performing a strange ritual to the Red God that took him and tied him up and cut off his, manhood. This ritual may have been what made him involved in the War for the Dawn arc. We simply don't have enough information. However, I don't believe this ritual should be ignored in this statement. It must have some sort of relevance here. What the likely explanation here is that she looked into the fire and she saw Varys dying in Westeros. So what I'm essentially trying to say here is that I don't believe that the whole ritual he underwent as a child is not of importance to the overall narrative. However, I don't believe it's where this statement came from. There must be some grand connection between Melisandre's visions of Varys and the sacrifice of his, when he was a kid. There just has to be. Everything's tied together in George R. R. Martin's work. It always weaves together like a grand spider web. Varys the spider. I made a pun. So moving along to King's Landing, where the other queen sits. I didn't understand the opening King's Landing scene at all. All the common folk were cheering for Euron and booing at the Sand Snakes and Yara. How do these peasants know who Euron even is? How do they know who the Sand Snakes even are? How do they know who Yara even are? How do they know who these people coming in through the gates are? It just doesn't make sense for them to be cheering and booing. It's not like Cersei actually talks to the peasants or gives them any information. It's not like these peasants receive a formal education on how the world works. Everything they know is hearsay. And hearsay isn't powerful enough to give someone a complete understanding of a whole geopolitical conflict. I thought that was a weird writing and directing decision on the part of the showrunners, but it's honestly not of that much importance in the overall narrative, so I can't really complain about this scene too much. Again, like I said, most of this episode's negatives are vastly overshadowed by its positives. So Cersei finally has what she wants. We're not getting the Dragonbinder, there's no way. Cersei has Ellaria and her daughter Tyene tied up in prison, and she taunts them, gets her revenge. She uses the same poison Ellaria used on Myrcella back in season 5. They did the whole kiss thing and the whole it will take a while for it to work. And Cersei gets her absolute, true, purest revenge. Now this whole Lannister-Martell revenge cycle is a sort of complicated issue. It's really unclear who exactly we should be rooting for here. For historical context, the whole conflict began during Robert's Rebellion. You see, Rhaegar Targaryen was married to a Dornish princess, and they had kids living in King's Landing. So when the Lannisters, in the end, joined Robert and turned on the Targaryens last minute, they had the Mountain go in and kill all the kids. So he just bashed them against the wall and killed them. They also killed the princess herself, who was Oberyn's sister. So Oberyn went to Westeros in season 4 to get revenge for his sister and their daughters. However, Oberyn was killed in his duel with the Mountain, so the Martells didn't get their revenge there. They wanted to take more procedures to get the revenge. However, the current sitting ruler of Dorne, who was Oberyn's brother, refused to let them take their revenge. This was when the Sand Snake group was formed by Oberyn's daughters and his wife. You see, in the books, the sitting ruler of Dorne had a elaborate, deep-seated plan known as the Dornish Master Plan, deep in the background in place for revenge. However, the Sand Snakes didn't see that, and that's what started their conflict. In the show, he didn't really have this plan and was killed by the Sand Snakes due to his apparent incompetence. So the Sand Snakes essentially finally got their revenge on the Lannisters by killing Myrcella. So essentially, they got their revenge, which was justified in a less than ethical way. And Cersei, obviously, we know Cersei, had to get her revenge back, and that's what we see here. That's essentially the short version of the whole Martell-Lannister conflict. I may do a separate video on that, but that really is all the context you need leading up to this scene. And Cersei is on top now, and there's really no one left ruling in Dorne. Dorne is going to be a mess. Knowing the showrunners, they probably won't address what will happen in Dorne. It will probably just fall under Lannister control. But yeah, the Martells and the Dornish hierarchy is essentially gone. Before we leave King's Landing, we see an ambassador from the Iron Bank of Braavos. If you don't remember what Braavos is, it's that Venice-like city on the west coast of Essos where Arya did all that House of Black and White stuff back in Season 5 and Season 6. So what this representative is here to tell Cersei is that Tywin, before his death, owed a major amount to the Iron Bank and has not yet paid it. He's considering giving funding to Daenerys because he feels that she has better odds in the war. However, Cersei assures him that the Lannisters always pay their debts and she will have the money for him. Based on the end of this episode, it seems likely where they're getting that funding from. Leaving King's Landing, we get one quick scene with Theon where he's rescued by the remainder of Yara's fleet. In this world, no one really has any concept of what PTSD actually is, they just see him as a coward. With the King's Landing segment and that segment, Daenerys has lost most of her council. We still have one more to go at Highgarden, but we'll get to that at the end of the episode. Moving back to Winterfell, Sansa's assumed a more leadership-like role, and Littlefinger is slipping little hints of his intention in there. So far, nothing too major, but let's keep an eye on him. Something I did not expect to happen is that Bran returns to Winterfell. He really wants to talk to Jon, specifically about two things, both his heritage, R plus L equals J, that was revealed in the finale of last season during Bran's Weirwood visions. Bran is the only one who knows of Jon's true parentage currently alive. Wouldn't that smooth things over with Daenerys if she found out that Jon was a Targaryen? But he also probably wants to talk to Jon about the War for the Dawn. He probably knows Jon's Azor Ahai. He is the Three-Eyed Raven, one of the highest mythical figures on the side of the Children of the Forest. But he's behaving really weird. He's essentially lost all personality in favor of embracing his Three-Eyed Raven identity, and it makes him almost non-human anymore. He's slowly transforming into this mythical, emotionless figure. This is really tragic. Sansa is deeply disturbed by this. He explains to her in great detail the night of her wedding, which did take place in front of a weirwood tree, so he's able to see that from all the way up beyond the wall. I understand why she's disturbed. I mean, it is a disturbing process, someone that you used to know and love that had a happy and vibrant personality, completely succumbing to their cold, emotionless mission in life. But not really much more happened there. We have to wait till Jon returns to Winterfell and Bran could talk to him then. In Old Town, Sam did indeed heal Jorah. Jorah is free to go. He's going to go back to Daenerys. Does the shake hand thing, solidifying that the grayscale is officially gone. Kind of stupid, kind of contrived. Then we get into the climax of the episode. The war has truly begun. Grey Worm and the rest of the Unsullied, using Tyrion's tactics, successfully take Casterly Rock. It's interesting to see that Tyrion had a major role in this battle. He was the one that built the sewer system of Casterly Rock. I didn't really realize that Casterly Rock was that young of a city. I thought it was a really old location lasting for hundreds of years. Maybe this is a show change that Tywin was the one that built Casterly Rock. I'm really not familiar with it. But if it is actually that young, I'm willing to concede to that fact. I don't really have a stake in the history of Casterly Rock. But they took it very easily. Too easily. A big chunk of the Lannister forces are gone. Not to mention Euron swooping in there in the aftermath, taking out a substantial chunk of the Unsullied fleet. He just had to get his grubby little hands in there, get a little action in. He couldn't just sit back and let them take the castle completely. But that's not really the point here. The point is that the taking of Casterly Rock was so easy because half the army was secretly on their way to Highgarden, the seat of House Tyrell. They take it very easily since the entire Tyrell forces are with Daenerys. They walk right up. There's really not many people there to defend the castle. Jaime goes straight up to Olenna, and initially this scene confused me. I thought maybe Olenna was a double agent and was working with the Lannisters all along. I was like, what is going on here? But then it really came sense. They're just being civil with each other. They sort of admire each other. Jaime finds it tragic that Olenna has to die here. So he takes pity on her and is like, listen, I'm just doing what Cersei wants and you're just doing what's best for your family. I understand that. That's why I'm going to give you an easy death. Cersei wanted to torture you. Cersei wanted to do horrible things to you, but I'm just going to give you a quick, painless poison for you to drink. We all know it has to happen. The army took Highgarden. you're gonna die. I'll just make it nice for you. We respect each other. Olenna takes it, drinks the wine, but before she dies from the poison, she reveals to Jaime that she was the mastermind behind the death of his son Joffrey. She was the one that worked hand in hand with Littlefinger to commit that horrible, violent poisoning, and she has to get that in there. She's like, tell Cersei. And it was the most badass scene ever. It just perfectly capped off a fantastic episode. It did have its bumps, but it was overall a fantastic ride. So much was jam-packed into that small hour, and I'm really looking forward to the final 4 episodes of this season. One more thing to mention before we go, moving back to what I was saying earlier, Daenerys' allies are really dwindled. While she had a major upper hand at the beginning, she now has the major underhand. She does have Casterly Rock, but the Lannisters have King's Landing, they have Lannisport, they now have Highgarden. So they gave up 1 stronghold, but they have 3 more just sitting there at their disposal. They may even have Dorne now with the Sand Snake death and the leadership virtually gone in that area of Westeros. So like I hypothesized before, Daenerys essentially needs Jon more than ever. She needs the North on her side. She needs more forces if she wants to take out Cersei. The tables have turned, and I'm really liking it. That's going to be it for this breakdown. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please comment below. If you want anything to be explained more deeply, you can request an explanation video below, and I'll be happy to oblige. If you liked what you saw today, hit that subscribe button, share this video with your friends, let them know the Professor of Thrones is here to teach you.